this is Rabbi Schneerson. And he is the leader, or he used to be, he's died, but he used to be the leader of an organization called the Shabbat Lubavitch. And he is talking to Benjamin Netanyahu, who is a young and upcoming politician in Israel. And so let's look at the conversation. This is Netanyahu. So what's going on here? Okay, so as an up-and-coming politician, Netanyahu is going to the rabbi, and the rabbis are the most powerful people in the Jewish society. He basically says, will you give me your blessing? Will you support me in my political endeavors? They also talk about how things are progressing. There's almost like a plan in motion to achieve certain religious objectives. And things are going well. But the Rabbi Schneerson says, but they're not going fast enough because we need the Messiah. And we can set in motion things that will force the coming of the Messiah. So let's speed things up, Netanyahu. Okay, all right, let's continue.
We want to know what you're reading now.
What I'm reading?
Yeah.
It's called The Jews Against Rome.
What made you pick it up?
Well, we lost that. I think we have to win the next one.
Okay. So that's a very quick exchange, okay? What book are you reading now? And he says, Rome versus the Jews. It's a book by Barry Strauss, a historian. And it goes on about the 3 wars that the Jews fought against the Romans. And it was essentially a Holocaust for the Jews. A lot of Jews either died or were enslaved. The Romans burned down the Second Temple. Okay? But what he said is, I'm reading this book because we lost that war against Rome. But in the next war against Rome, we must not lose. The question then is, who's Rome? It's not Iran, guys. It's probably not Russia. It's probably America, right? The great empire. This is strange because Israel is the ally of America in this war. So I want you guys to keep this in mind. All right, this is Peter Hegseth, who is the Secretary of War for Donald Trump, okay? And this is the year about 2018, where he is in Jerusalem and he's talking to Christian Zionists. Let's listen to his speech really quickly.
And I and others had a chance to go see the western wall of the Temple Mount, so much of the old city. And as you stand there, you can't help but behold the miracle before you. And it got me thinking about another miracle that I hope all of you don't see too far away. Because 1917 was a miracle, 1967 was a miracle, 2017, the declaration of Jerusalem as the capital was a miracle. And there's no reason why the miracle of the reestablishment of the temple on the Temple Mount is not possible.
Okay, so he is a Christian. He's not a Jew. And what he's saying is that, well, if this is a series of steps to achieving a divine plan, then the next miracle should be the rebuilding of Solomon's temple, the third temple, and that means destroying the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Okay, again, I'll explain to you later on, but I want you to be aware of who these people are and how they think. All right, let's go one more video.
Missiles will hit the mosque and clear the place for the third Bet HaMikdash. That could also be a miracle. If it was up to me, the last time when they shot hundreds of missiles, I would pretend that one missile came from Iran and shoot it down. Then all the Arabs will go against Iran, it will be the end of the problems. You make them fight with each other, this bunch of lunatics.
So, again, this may be confusing to you as to who these people are, why they are saying these things. Okay, and I keep on saying this, but it is hard from a geopolitical perspective to explain this US-Iran war. You have to look at the religious perspective, okay? The religious angle, and that's what I want to focus on today. Okay, so again, this is the 3 holiest site in the Islamic world. This is Saudi Arabia, Mecca, Medina, and this is Dome of the Rock, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is where Muhammad was supposed to ascend to heaven. And the Jews and the Christian Zionists believe that this must be destroyed so that they can build the third temple. So this is the big question in this war. I keep on saying this, but I need to be right in my prediction if my analysis is to be correct. If they do not destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque, then my predictive model, my analysis is completely wrong, and you just ignore me, okay, for the rest of my life. All right, so let us examine why this is important, okay? So today I want to introduce you to a new theory of game theory called the law of eschatological convergence. So this is a very hard thing to write down, okay? It sounds complicated, but it's not, okay? Eschatology, what it is a story of how the world ends. And it's very compelling for people because remember, as human beings, we have three questions. Where do we come from? Why are we here? Where are we going? And eschatology provides a story that answers all three questions. Why God created us, what our mission on earth is, and what God has planned for the end of the world. Okay? And different traditions will have different eschatologies. And what's important to figure out is, in what aspect do these eschatologies converge? And why is that important? Because it allows you to predict how they will behave. All right, so the first thing to understand is, what is eschatology? Most religions are similar. Most religions require you to be a good person. But there are certain aspects of religions that are extreme, okay? And we can call them eschatologies. The classic example is the Jewish religion. Okay? In the Jewish religion, what you believe is that you no longer live in Israel because a long time ago, the Israelites pissed off God by disobeying him. So they were kicked out of Jerusalem and they were forced to wander the earth in the diaspora for centuries. And so what they believe is that they each need to engage in an act of redemption, of humility, of submission, of piety to God if they are to redeem the whole Jewish people. Okay? And when that happens, when they recognize their own limitations, how inferior they are to God, and submit to God, then God will send the Messiah to redeem them and lead them back to Jerusalem, defeat the enemies of the Jews, bring all the Jews from the diaspora back to Jerusalem, unify the Jewish people, and then build the third temple so that God can come to earth and live with all the Jews and create heaven on earth, okay? That is the Jewish religion that most Jews believe. Okay, like there are a lot of differences, okay? But I'm just trying to simplify it for clarity, okay? But then you have these extremes, fanatics, who have a different eschatology, okay? And these people, we can say, are accelerationists. And their point is that this is fine, but it's way too slow. And it dissolves us of individual responsibility. If you have faith in God, then you should want to hurry things up and force the return of God as soon as possible. And you do that by recognizing that if you actually go and create the nations of Israel, bring all the Jews back, build the third temple, defeat all the enemies, then the Messiah will come naturally. So of course, most Jews hear this and they think that this is blasphemy, it's heresy. You think you can manipulate God into action. That is wrong. And so this eschatology is considered a fringe, something to be ignored. The problem though is that if you think about it, what an eschatology really is doing is creating a vector to force the religion to move in a certain direction. Also, if you think about it, if this is the case where eschatology is a vector that forces the mainstream to move in a certain direction, then whichever eschatology is the most extreme, will be the one that wins out. In other words, what we're going to do today is look at the most extreme versions of different eschatologies. Because, quite honestly, even though these extreme versions are shared by only a few people, they're the ones who are working the hardest to achieve their eschatology, and therefore they're forcing the religion they are in to move a certain way. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share with you a passage from a biography of Rabbi Sneerson. Remember, we had a look at Rabbi Sneerson talking to Netanyahu and saying, hurry up, let's hurry up the return of the Messiah, okay? This is a biography of Rabbi Sneerson. And the Shabbat Lubavitch movement was founded in modern-day Belarus, and over time it went over to America because it suffered a lot of persecution by the Russians. And today they are a global movement, and they are powerful in Russia, in America, and in Israel. I want to, with this passage, show you how coordination among eschatologists work, okay? So the year is 1939, and the Nazis, Nazi Germany's, again, who are anti-Semitic, they hate Jews, they are overrunning Europe. And by 1939, they have conquered Poland. Now, Poland, Warsaw is where the head rabbi, the Rebbe of the Shabbat Lubavitch movement is, and his name is Yosef Yetzat, okay? And he's the father-in-law of Rabbi Sneerson. And he's an old man, and he's in Warsaw. The Nazis are overrunning the city. So his followers in America want to save his life, okay? So then the question then is like, but how do you do that? Because America and Germany are not best friends. The war is breaking out in Europe, and Yosef Yewitz is a very old man. And there are no planes, well, there are planes, but there are no commercial air flights that you can take, okay? So it's gonna be a very long, arduous journey across many borders. Plus, he will need a visa, not just for himself, but for his whole family. Now what I'll show you is how powerful these people are. And again, this is an eschatology where they all share a similar vision, and therefore they're willing to make the necessary sacrifices in order to help each other achieve this vision, okay? All right, so this is from the biography. In Ocean Away in America, Yosef Yezuit's followers were mounting a rescue effort. With the help of Stan Kramer, an Orthodox attorney, the son of Lubavitch immigrants, the Shabbat activist Israel Jacobson hired Max Road, a politically connected lawyer, to secure American visas for Yosef Yewitz and his family, okay? So, in other words, even though there may not be that many followers, they have a wide political circle. And a lot of the reason why is that they pool their resources together. And when they pool their resources together, they're able to invest in real estate together, they're able to invest in business together, and they're able to generate a lot of money, which they can then use to influence politics in America, okay? They can buy out politicians, they can do a lot of things. Now the problem is, how do you actually get to him, okay? Because there are no telephones, there's no internet. How do you find him when there's a war going on in Poland, when there are Nazis everywhere? Yosef Yewitz followers also reached out to Attorney General Benjamin Cohen, okay, and Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis, okay. This man is very important. He's what we call a Sabbatine Francus. What I'll show you later on is that Sabbatine Francus and the Shabbat Lubavitch movement are very much aligned. Okay, so even though they're not part of the same movement, they are sympathetic towards each other. And he's the most powerful Jew in America at this time, okay, in the 1930s, 40s, whom Yosef Yewitz had met during his fundraising trip of 1929. The Lubavitch efforts in America were successful, all right? So they won over the Americans, and they are dedicated to helping the rabbi escape Europe and come to America. Now the second part is, how do you deal with the Nazis? Okay. On October 2nd, Cohen wrote to Robert Pell, a senior official in the State Department, asking for help. The next day, Pell contacted Helmuth Wadhat, a German and a member of the Nazi Party, a Nazi, who specialized in national industry and economics, to see if he would be willing to save one of the leading Jewish scholars in the world. This is a guy, American, writing to a Nazi and saying, hey man, I know you're a Nazi, but we need your help to save a Jew. And the guy says, yes. Wilhite was strategically chosen. He had studied at Columbia University in the early 1930s and had forged a relationship with Pell after the Evian Conference on Jewish Refugees in 1938. Seeing an opportunity to curry goodwill of the United States, Wilhite secretly contacted Admiral William Canaras, the head of German military intelligence. Wow! The head of German military intelligence. And saying, hey man, let's help this guy. Canaris, a skeptical Nazi who disapproved of SS atrocities and thought the invasion of Poland a mistake, enlisted Major Ernst Bloch, a distinguished veteran of World War I and one of the most trusted officers. Bloch was a Mischling. Okay, a Mischling just means a German who had some Jewish ancestry, but because he was so valorous in World War I, he was considered a German, okay? He had been declared of German blood by Hitler in 1939. Along with 3 other soldiers, 2 of whom were also Mischling, Bloch was instructed to find Josef Yetzet and bring him to safety. Wow. The Nazis, okay, dispatched their own soldiers to find this guy and bring him to America. But how do you find this guy? Bloch and his colleagues had to maneuver through the ruins of Warsaw without arousing the suspicions of the SS to find a rabbi who did not know of their mission and did not want to be found. Okay, so this rabbi is hiding from everyone. So how do you find this guy? And he's deadly afraid of all German soldiers because he sees them as just Nazis. Jews in the city were naturally unwilling to divulge the location of a Hasidic leader to a Nazi officer. Eventually, the information came from the Americans. Brandeis was informed of Josef Yevet's address by the Shabbat lawyer Arthur Rubinowitz and relayed it via Cohen and Pell to the U.S. charged affairs in Germany. This requires the coordination of dozens and dozens of people who are supposed to be on the opposite side of a war. At the end of November, Bloch found Josef Yevet's apartment and after some confusion convinced the residents he was there to help. Once he had obtained fuel coupons, train tickets, and military clearances for SS checkpoints, Bloch loaded Josef Yetzet and his family onto a truck and headed for the train station. There the family received first-class tickets and boarded a train filled with Nazi officials and soldiers. Okay, and that's how they got him out. They are able to work above the bureaucracy of different nation states in order to achieve their eschatological goal. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the idea of eschatological convergence. Because once we know the different eschatologies and we know how they converge together, we can actually make certain predictions about how this war will progress. So the first major eschatology I want to look at is called Zoroastrianism. It's the eschatology of the Persian Empire, okay? And this eschatology is very simple. In the world, there's truth and the lie, the light and the darkness. And it is our responsibility as humans to live for the light, to die for the truth. And at the end of days, there will be a final battle and a day of judgment, okay? So what matters is to live a noble life and await the day of judgment where eventually heaven on earth will manifest, okay? And this is important because if you think about how the Iranians are fighting this war, the Iranians refuse to take the initiative and destroy too much, okay? They refuse to be the villains because for them, in their eschatology, it's important to die for the light, to fight for the truth, okay? Now, Zoroastrianism has a major impact on Jewish eschatology. And Jewish eschatology, again, I'm only talking about the most extreme version of this eschatology, okay? And in this eschatology, the idea is that the Jews disobeyed God. And in order to repair the world, to save themselves, to create heaven on earth, they need to engage in redemption. And redemption is really about spiritual alchemy, improving yourself as a person, being good to yourself, being good to others. Okay, that's a mainstream idea. But in the most extreme version, redemption just means acting out God's plan to compel the return of Messiah, okay? And this plan is basically create Israel, return Jewish diaspora, build third temple, And this will launch something called the War of Gog and Magog. And then when the Jews are most threatened, the Messiah will come to save them. And this will create something called the Messianic age, okay? When God rules over the earth through his Messiah, who comes from the house of David. Now, what's interesting is that this Jewish eschatology would go on to influence the Protestants, okay? And this creates a movement called Christian Zionism. So the technical word for Christian Zionism is called premillennial dispensationalism. Okay? And this sounds very complicated, but it's not. All it means is that God has a plan for how to create heaven on earth. And we have a duty to fulfill his plan by following his instructions. So what Christian Zionism is doing is that it takes this Jewish eschatology and makes certain changes to it. For example, the first change that it makes is, okay, this plan is fine, but rather than say that the Jewish Messiah is the representative of God, what they say is that no, he's actually the representative of Satan. So the Messiah in the Jewish tradition becomes the Antichrist in the Christian Zionist tradition. And why is this important? It's important because for the Christians, the Messiah must be Jesus, okay? So the Messiah, so the Antichrist, what he does is that he rules over the world. He's very charismatic, and he rules the world in Jerusalem. And he starts the War of Gog and Magog. Now, at this point, Jesus will return to save God's chosen people, the Jews. So another way of saying this is, in the beginning, Zionists and Christian Zionists will work together to reach a certain point of history, okay, what we call the Great Israel Project. But then they will diverge and fight against each other. So they're allies now, but eventually they'll turn against each other. All right, so now I want to talk about the Freemasons. The Freemasons are also working within the Christian Zionist context, but they are much more focused on actually how to implement this, okay? So what they want to do is they want to take the Antichrist and turn it into a system, Pax Judaica. What is Pax Judaica? Pax Judaica is that Israel controls the world through AI, okay, an AI surveillance state. Or their exact words is Holy Empire. And Pax Judaica, the AI surveillance state, will have things such as the mark of the beast. It is digital ID. And they can actually put a microchip or a QR bar in your forehead, and this will be considered the mark of the beast, okay? And it's all part of the Christian Zionist eschatology. Another really important thing about the Freemasons is the idea of a one world government. Because remember, the Antichrist is the leader of a one world government, and it'll be based in Jerusalem, okay? And so the headquarters will be Solomon's temple, or the third temple. And then you have the Islamic eschatology. And the Islamic eschatology is a response to all these other eschatologies. They say that when the system is created, it'll be called Dajjal. And when this happens, then Jesus will return to defeat the Antichrist. Okay, that's the mainstream Islamic eschatology. Then you have the Shia, remember, are the Iranians, where they believe that it will be the 12th Imam Mahdi who will lead the followers, okay, the Ummah. Okay, Ummah just means community of believers, to believers, into victory against the Antichrist, the Dajjal, okay? So you can see how these eschatologies are basically lining up together. Now, there are two more eschatologies I want to look at. Another eschatology that's very important is the Catholic eschatology. We can call City of God, okay, which is the church, which is Jerusalem. And St. Augustine talks about this, about how the Catholic Church, it is the millennium, it is the Messianic age, because we represent God and we bring peace and prosperity to the world. Now, what's important about the church is that it became the dominant power in the world because Rome fell, okay? So Roman Empire collapses, Now, the city of God came in the end because of the rise of the Protestants and the Anglo-American Empire. So for the Catholic Church to achieve its eschatology and establish again the city of God, what they need to do is also see the Anglo-American Empire destroyed, just like the Roman Empire. The last eschatology I want to discuss is the Orthodox eschatology. And what's the Orthodox eschatology? The Russians, okay? And this is called the Third Rome prophecy, okay? The Third Rome prophecy is basically that Moscow will become the third Rome. Okay, the first Rome was Rome, second Rome was Constantinople, the third Rome will be Moscow. There will be no fourth Rome. So when Moscow becomes the third Rome, history ends. And something that is very important that this prophecy says is that the Russians will defeat Turkey and then have the Greeks return to Constantinople, which is modern day Istanbul. And so you look at all these different eschatologies, okay? And again, if you actually look at their convergence points, you come to some startling conclusions, okay? So let's look at the convergence. Where do they converge, okay? Well, first of all, the greater Israel project will be achieved, okay? It's the one world government, okay? That is one major convergence. If that's true, then another convergence is the Al-Aqsa Mosque will give way to the third temple. All these eschatologies either say this or are indifferent to saying this, okay? They're not opposed to this, all right? So that's why I predict the Al-Aqsa Mosque will be destroyed because they need to build a third temple. Another thing which they converge is the rise of anti-Semitism. Why? Because that will force the diaspora, the Jewish diaspora, to return to Israel. This is very important for this eschatology, okay? Another important convergence point is the war of Gog and Magog. We don't actually know what this is, but this war is supposed to be the final war before the end of history, before the end of the world, okay? What this war is, we don't know yet. But another thing is that this war in Iran will lead to the war of Gog and Magog at some point. Another thing that's very important is US and China are not part of this eschatology. This is where everyone agrees. For whatever reason, the United States is not going to partake in future events. Neither will China. Which means that something will happen to these two countries that will make them not significant anymore, okay? And the best prediction for the United States then is civil war. So in other words, this war in Iran is happening so that these different eschatological traditions can achieve heaven on earth from their perspective.